Welcome to the Well Path podcast, where we sit down with experts and entrepreneurs across fitness, nutrition, mindfulness, and spirituality, offering you an inside peek at building a business and a life that is truly aligned. I'm your host, Brooke Robbins. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Well Path podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Robbins. Last week, we kicked off the self-trust series with an episode on why you don't trust yourself. We talked about self-abandonment and some of sort of the sneaky ways that self-abandonment can appear that we may not even recognize. And last episode was kind of about recognizing the ways in which we habitually self-abandon and how that can erode our sense of self-trust. For the next couple of episodes in this series, I really want to take us through a sequence that is going to be really, really tactical in terms of helping you set a really strong foundation for self-trust. So before we kind of jump into that, I want to just quickly recap some signs that you may have a self-trust problem, which again is actually very common. I think it's something that most people have to work towards, is having like a really strong sense of self-trust. But a couple of like signs and symptoms that you may or may not relate to are, one, you opinion shop. So if you have a tendency to trust other people's opinions over your own. And the distinction that I always like to make is it's of course okay to ask for opinions on certain things, but are you discerning about who you ask opinions from? For example, you wouldn't ask relationship advice from somebody who's in a relationship that you don't admire, and you wouldn't ask career advice from somebody who is not in a career that you would want to emulate. So if you find yourself opinion shopping people, irregardless of whether or not they have actually any additional knowledge, expertise, or experience than you have, but rather you're just kind of asking for opinions broadly, that's a good sign that you're trying to outsource your own intuition. And that is a very dangerous thing to do, which we'll talk a little bit more about in this episode. Another sign is you second guess your decisions. So are you somebody who, once making a decision, really commits to the decision and like kind of makes the decision right? Or do you have a tendency after making a decision about something to spend time kind of hyperfixating on it, considering reneging on it, maybe even reversing course? If you tend to second guess your decisions, it's also another sign that you don't really trust yourself. And then thirdly is a general feeling of directionlessness. So this can manifest as kind of orienting yourself around someone or something outside of you and your own vision for your life. That can look like a codependent relationship. It can look like over-identifying with a job or a career, any kind of like hyper-fixation and attachment to something outside of you is another symptom of this. Now, this episode is going to kind of be a bridge. The last episode, as we discussed, was kind of a why you don't trust yourself and starting to understand some of the mechanics behind lack of self-trust. And today, I want to really talk about knowing yourself, because to trust yourself requires first that you know yourself on a deep level, on a soul level, and that you feel connected to him or her. In future episodes, we're going to cover from that point of really knowing who you are, learning how to trust yourself, learning how to connect to your intuition, how to actually build a sense of self-respect and self-trust that allows you to make decisions with confidence. And then last, but certainly not least, the third pillar we are going to cover in the following episode is going to be trusting in a higher power and why faith is the foundation of self-trust. So we're going to get there. But first things first, we're talking today about knowing and coming to meet the real you. So who is the real you? I want to introduce this concept of the personality. Your personality is your personal reality, right? And I think one paradox that can be really challenging for people, myself included, to reconcile is the fact that personality is fluid, right? We aren't the same throughout all of the different chapters of our lives. We're constantly changing and evolving, and life is constantly changing and evolving. And there's kind of a existential question that can come up around, if personality is fluid and things are always changing, what parts of myself, if any, are actually true or unchanging? What does it mean to actually have like a core essence? Like, who am I, And I think that this can be really destabilizing to start to ask yourself, because we rely on and tend to identify with elements of our personality to kind of honestly make us feel sane, like we have an identity. And sometimes when you start to peel back the layers of that, it can feel, a little disorienting, like, who am I really? But my belief is that there is a core essence. You could call it the soul, you could call it your authentic self, you could call it your higher self. There is something at the core of each of us that is unique, that is special, that is your own specific magic, and that has been with you for your entire lifetime. And part of the journey of discovering who you really are is a journey of differentiating between the parts of yourself that are innate and that are part of your core essence versus the parts of yourself that have been learned or programmed throughout different phases of your life. And the main thing that I want to say while we're kind of getting into this is I want to remind everybody that you have the ability to change yourself and your life at any time. You are both the main character, but also the writer and the director and the producer of your own life. So I want to kind of make sure that that's clear, that yes, there's going to be elements to you that are really innate and part of your soul's kind of journey, and maybe even your soul's purpose of why you came here on earth in this lifetime. But the kind of circumstances of your life are always within your control. And we'll get more into that. So one part of understanding who you really are is starting to identify your own unique core values. These are the principles that guide your decisions and help you align with your own kind of deepest sense of self. This is going to be different for everybody. I got introduced to the concept of an authentic code earlier this year. There is a wonderful kind of app and program called To Be Magnetic, run by this woman called Lacey Phillips. You guys should definitely look it up. They have an amazing podcast as well called the Expanded Podcast. And a friend of mine actually introduced me to it and kind of asked me to be an accountability buddy for her in this kind of authenticity challenge. And I really, really enjoyed it. And one of the exercises that we did through that program was an exercise to define our own authentic codes. And it was kind of interesting because earlier that year, as you guys know that listen to the podcast, I had kind of a crazy year last year with lots of life changes. And I had done an exercise kind of similar to this of like really distilling my own core values, because I had recognized that some of them seemed to have changed between my early 20s and then my late 20s, and now early 30s. So the concept of an authentic code is really distilling your own unique set of values, priorities, and traits to some extent that make you you. And it's so important to understand your own authentic code, because it's really like the North Star and the map for all of the other decisions that you're going to make. And when it comes to particularly like relationally, understanding your own authentic code is so important, because one of the big mistakes that we can make in relationship to other people is mistaking shared interests for shared values. And those things are very different. And shared values is what really sets the foundation for a strong partnership and a strong connection, whether that's romantic or even like from a friendship perspective, perhaps even from a business partner perspective, but just relationally understanding your own and then somebody else's core values and the parts of them that are the same and the parts of them that differ is really useful to understand your kind of dynamic with somebody. So all of that is to say, identifying your own core values is a really interesting and can be a very enlightening exercise. So I'm going to walk you guys through a process for doing that. And feel free to pause this, feel free to come back to it later. But the kind of process that I like to follow for identifying my own core values is first starting with a brain dump. So you can write down everything that's important to you in your life, kind of like feelings, experiences, people, activities. Part of this is also similar to if anyone has done like an ikigai exercise. That's the Japanese concept of, finding the marriage between what you love to do, what the world needs. I'm gonna butcher this, but it's like what you love to do, what the world needs, and what can make money. I think there might be one more, but kind of like understanding the Venn diagram of those things. It's like taking an inventory basically of the things in your life, like what lights you up, what brings you joy, what do you care about when you envision your life 5, 10, 15 years from now. What matters to you? Is it, a family? Is it having strong friendships? Is it adventure and travel? Is it, financial abundance? And if so, for what purpose, right? What is it that you're kind of aiming for? What are the kind of feelings and experiences that you're optimizing for? And then once you've kind of written all of that down, you can sort of start to identify patterns and group and name the themes. So you can kind of cluster some of the items into categories. One example could be like freedom, creativity, connection, family, even. And then once you have that, you kind of take this process of like ranking and reflecting on these different components and understanding for yourself which ones are actually non-negotiable for you in your life, what things actually give you the most energy, what are the things that when you look at the word, it like gives you this little spark inside and you're like, oh yeah, that one's for me. Like I can say for me, like freedom is a big one or connection is a big one. So like just spend a little bit of time with yourself in the quiet of your own mind when you have some time by yourself to do this exercise and condense it into a short bullet point list of ideally like 3 to 5 values maximum. I think 4 is the magic number, but 3 to 5 is good. And that's kind of like the basis of your authentic code. And then when you're making decisions, you can always kind of bring it back to that of like, what of my core values is this actually moving forward? Is this progressing? Which of my core values might this be jeopardizing? And it's a really good kind of compass to have. The other component of understanding who you really are that I have found to be so important and also so healing is reconnecting with your inner child. I feel like that term, like inner child, can kind of like be overused recently. It's like becoming more, I would say, like mainstream to kind of talk about, healing your inner child, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll share a couple of things that I've experienced in my life that have really demonstrated to me the importance of doing this. So first and foremost, one really great tool that I found for connecting back to my inner child has been hypnotherapy. And I've had a couple of different hypnotherapists on the podcast. There's an episode with Caroline Leone, who's actually like a Guinness World Record holding mountaineer. She recently climbed Mount Everest, but she's also a hypnotherapist. And when I was living in Dubai, I did a couple of sessions with her that were extremely illuminating. And then Kira Yang as well is a hypnotherapist too. And hypnotherapy is really interesting because it's not as woo-woo as it sounds. It's really a practice that allows you to tap into your subconscious mind, perhaps even resurfacing memories that you didn't have conscious memory of previously from your childhood. This definitely happened for me. So when I had my sessions with Caroline, there were memories from my childhood that I didn't have conscious memory of that came up that I then verified with my siblings that did in fact actually happen. So it is real. It is interesting. And I share that because childhood memories often hold clues to your authentic self, who you were before things got programmed into you. And then also it can give you a window into some of the things that may have happened in your childhood that may have shifted you away in some ways from who you truly are. But who you truly are is that core essence that you were actually born with. And a couple of like things that could be interesting to ask yourself in this process of sort of reconnecting with your own inner child or that younger version of yourself are, what did you love to do as a child? What was your personality like before you learned to perform for other people? What did you dream of becoming when you were a child? What did you think you wanted to be? I think these are really interesting. Did you have any like idiosyncratic kind of hobbies or like, it's going to sound so weird. Oh my gosh, if my siblings listening to this, they're going to be like, I can't believe you're admitting this to like a public audience. But like, I used to talk to trees, like for real. Like I had this one tree in my backyard that like I would talk to. And everyone thought I was so weird. And I got so much SHIT for that growing up. But like looking back, I'm like, oh, that's because I was meant to explore spirituality. And I've always been so connected to like nature and God. And even when I didn't necessarily have the lexicon for it, that's just always been a part of me, right? So there might be these little things that you dismiss, or maybe you've even shamed yourself for as a child, that are actually clues and windows into the true essence of your soul. One really healing thing that I have started to do, actually in conjunction with starting to work with an amazing spiritual coach and kind of mentor, is really consciously reconnecting with my inner child and doing a lot of journaling around that. One really fun thing that she had me do is find a photo of myself as a child that sort of portrays my original essence, whatever that means for you, and then just like put it as your phone wallpaper and kind of start this process of like really reconnecting with who she or he is. And also like learning to love that version of you as if it were your own child. But we'll go more into inner child stuff, I'm sure, in a future episode. Point being, for the purposes of this episode, reconnecting with your inner child, going back into childhood memories, trying as best as you can to remember or recall elements of your personality when you were young are a really good way to, peel back the layers and understand what is like part of your kind of core essence that's always been with you. And the last thing that I want to say on kind of like self-discovery and tools and resources, different things are going to resonate for different people. So as always with the podcast, I say, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. But I do want to share some tools that have been really helpful for me. So I've mentioned kind of inner child work, hypnotherapy being a component of that. The To Be Magnetic program is another one. Particularly, their workshops on inner child and authenticity are really, really useful, or I found them to be helpful as kind of part of my toolbox. And then lastly, human design. And I think we're probably going to do at least one, maybe even several episodes kind of talking about human design and covering human design, because it has been a pretty influential tool for me over the last couple of years since I've discovered it. But human design is really a blueprint for how you're meant to do life. And it's a part science, part spiritual system, similar in some ways to astrology in the sense that it leverages your kind of birth time, place, etc. So like, it's similar in that way. It calls upon kind of similar principles, but it's also very different. And human design gives you a sense for, well, the most important part of human design is your energy type, which is the way that you kind of create and harness energy in the world, which is different for everybody. But there are other elements in there that can give you clues into some of your most important gifts, as well as your soul's kind of purpose and what you were actually put on earth here to do. So I want to share that as a resource if anybody is interested. I personally love Jenna Zoe's app, the Align app. It's phenomenal. So feel free to check that out. I will add links in the show notes to some of these things for anybody that's interested in trying out some of these tools. But I wanted to share that quickly here. So once again, knowing yourself is really the foundation to trusting yourself. So we are going to, in the next episode, talk more strategically around connecting to your intuition, building a sense of self-love, respect, and trust that really actually allows you to make decisions with confidence and what that can look like. But in order to feel confident in your decisions, it's important to know the basis of those decisions. And part of feeling confident in your decisions is knowing who you are and what you care about to a level where you can actually hold your decisions up against that as a mirror and make sure that there is alignment there. And that alignment is what actually gives you confidence to move forward with grace and basically stop looking back, because I think that's honestly one of the most challenging things about being a human is the tendency that many of us have to second guess ourselves. And self-trust, a lack of self-trust is one of the most uncomfortable feelings. And I know this because I spent most of my 20s feeling completely lost, honestly. I was horrible at making decisions, and I second guessed all my decisions because, back to the point at hand for this episode, I didn't really know who I was or what I was optimizing for. And so this is kind of like this excavation of your own true self and your own core values is like the foundation for the self-trust work that we're going to build on in the next episodes of this series. So think of this as kind of like your root or your foundation. To recap, self-trust starts with self-knowledge. Your authentic code is your compass, and your inner child is like your original map. So in the next episode, we're going to be talking about ways to start trusting yourself. We're going to talk specifically about tactical ways to connect to your intuition. So if you're somebody who's like, I don't have gut feelings about things, I don't know how I feel about things. Like, I see you, I hear you. I used to be the exact same way. And I can tell you that now I have a very, very, very strong connection to my intuition. So it is very possible to build that. And we're going to go through tactical processes to actually do that. We're also going to talk about a little bit of a deep dive on leveraging human design to understand how you specifically are designed to receive divine guidance. And then, like I said, we are also going to be talking about establishing a connection to ultimately a higher power and why and how that plays into the topic of self-trust and decision making. So I want to invite everybody to journal on the prompts that were mentioned. I'm going to put those in the show notes as well. I will also be sharing my own authentic code and kind of like a worksheet / exercise to help you connect to your own authentic code and define that on Instagram. So if we're not already connected, the podcast is at the.well.path on Instagram. We're also on TikTok. I'm going to be posting some more resources there over the course of the next week. So stay tuned for that. Last but not least, if you enjoy the podcast and you haven't already, please take a second to rate and review us or leave a comment on this episode. All of these things really help the show grow. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to see you in the next episode. Have an amazing rest of your week.